welcome to my card tutorial. This is Kendra Morgan with Cards by Kendra. Today I'll be sharing with you how I made this herringbone background Father's Day card that features the new Speckled Egg distress color. I started out with the Concord and 9th herringbone background stamp, and I am using Distress Watercolor cardstock, and I'll be using the smooth side of this watercolor cardstock. So I'm placing it down on my Stamparatus. This is by Stampin' Up, but this is similar to the Misty. And I'm placing this brand new stamp that I haven't used before directly on top, and then I'll be picking that up with the plate. And I originally placed this magnet down so that it would hold it in place, but then I realized that that corner would not get inked up. So I ended up not using it, but I took VersaMark embossing ink and I rubbed it all over the area that is going to be stamped on this cardstock and made sure that it was in the corner and pressed down firmly. And I repeated this process again just to make sure that I had a really good impression. I've listed all of the products that I'm using in today's card tutorial in the description below. Okay, so I'm ready to coat this with white embossing powder. So I always use a sheet of paper or scrap cardstock and fold it in half so that I can easily put my embossing powder back in the jar. So I completely cover the cardstock. And I want to be careful not to smudge the background because it's coating the entire thing. So I'm trying to use these tweezers instead of putting my fingers on the edges because I don't want to mess those up. So I'm trying to put the tweezers between the grooves on the herringbone. And I lightly tap the back of the cardstock to get any excess powder off. Of course, every single time I use embossing powder, I make a mess. But one great thing about having this Tonic Studios glass mat is that everything wipes up easily. You can use it for distress inks, alcohol inks, just about anything. So I'm taking a paintbrush now. I'm brushing off the excess powder. And then I will be embossing this with my heat gun. And I've sped this up for you just because I don't want to bore you. It did take quite a while because this is a pretty big background. Okay, so after letting that sit for a little bit to cool off, I am using my Distress Oxide Inks, my brand new Speckled Egg color that I just got in, and I'm using the Picket Studios Life-Changing Brush Set to apply the Speckled Egg to the center of this cardstock. And then I'm applying it pretty heavy because I'm going to be blending this into the outer edges, which will be blended with Faded Jeans color. I wanted to have like a glowing effect, and I wanted to use blue since this will be for Father's Day. Of course, I sped this up. I wish that blending went this fast. One thing I want to mention when you're blending like this is to use a scrap piece of cardstock to hold on to the edges so that you don't get your fingerprints in the ink. Now this could have easily been done on a piece of regular cardstock, but when I initially started this, I wasn't sure if I was going to be applying the water effects, so that's why I started out with using the Distress Watercolor cardstock. Okay, so now I'm taking a scrap piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I am going to be coating this with the Faded Jeans Distress Oxide. And the reason I'm doing this is so that I can have a background for the shield, and so I can cut out the letters for Dad. Okay, so I am using the shield from the My Hero Stampin' Up stamp set. And I will be cutting this out with the Best Badge punch, which I've never used before, so I'm excited to use it. So I am drying this Distress Oxide ink so that I can apply VersaMark ink to the top of this, and I will be coating this with the new Distress Embossing Glaze in Speckled Egg color. So this is my first time using Distress Embossing Glaze, and I was really excited to have the speckled egg so that it would match the background. But I did find that because I put this on top of the faded jeans, it totally changed the color. But that's the great thing about these embossing glazes, is that you can apply them on top of other colors and you'll receive different effects. So again, here I'm just kind of brushing off the excess. And then I will be heat setting this with my heat gun. So one thing I want to mention whenever you're applying a heat gun to just regular cardstock, be sure to apply heat to both sides so that it doesn't warp the cardstock like it happened here. I had a hard time getting the cardstock inside the punch because it was a little bit warped. So after I cut this out, I realized that I wanted to have a little bit of dimension. So I wanted to make sure that my letters stuck up as well. So I ended up cutting out 3 layers of letters in white cardstock, and then I'll be applying the colored piece to the top. And I'm adhering these together using the Zig Memory System 2-way glue squeeze and roll pen, which makes it really easy to glue together small pieces and not have glue everywhere. So you may have noticed that I was short one of the layers for the D, the last D, so I ended up doing that off camera. So this next part, I wasn't quite sure how exactly to do this, but it seemed to work okay. I wanted to make the letters shiny, like the shiny part of the shield. So I just placed them down and then picked them up with my VersaMark ink pad. And even though my VersaMark ink pad is really dirty, it's still, I've re-inked it and it's fine. But I've coated these with the embossing glaze as well. And then I'm carefully picking them up with my tweezers. And I'll be heat embossing each of the letters. And they turned out pretty neat. The color matched the color on the shield, and I was pretty happy with the way they turned out. So I really sped this part of the video up. This was kind of tricky, holding on to each of the letters with the tweezers and getting the heat gun and making sure that I didn't smudge any, but they turned out okay. So now I'm scoring a 4 1/4 by 11 piece of cardstock directly down the center at 5 1/2. And I'm making my crease with my bone folder. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get the bottoms lined up exactly, so that's what I was struggling with there. But I wanted this to be a top folding card. And I ended up trimming off 1/8 of an inch from each of the edges so that I would have a little bit of a white frame. And there were a couple of places where my finger did smudge the edge, so I was able to cut those off. So now I'm adding 3 white cardstock layers for the shield to give that dimension as well. And I am gluing these together using Nouveau Deluxe Adhesive Clear Drying Craft Glue. That's kind of hard to say. And then I'm also taking the faded jeans using a sponge dauber, and I am covering the edges so that it doesn't have that stark white edge. I wanted it to look like an actual shield. So now it's time to glue the background onto the card base. I'm using that same Nouveau glue. And I'm applying this liberally since this is a piece of watercolor cardstock. It's a little bit thicker than what I usually use. I usually use the glue runners, the permanent ones, but once it's stuck, it is down. So I switched over to the liquid glue, and I really like that a lot better. I initially tried to glue these letters down using the Zig pen, but for some reason it wasn't sticking to the embossed glossy coat, so I ended up changing over to that Nuvo craft glue as well, and that worked much better. So I'm just trying to flatten these out some. And another great thing I should say about this glass mat is that you can use it to find the center of your card. So I placed it so that I could find exactly where to place the A. And I put my punch on top of those letters just to kind of hold them in place for a second. And then I decided to use the permanent glue runner on the back of the shield, just in case the liquid glue was going to give me the same problems with sticking to the embossed part of the background. So now to finish off this card, I'm using Nuvo Crystal Drops in Morning Dew color. This dries clear, but it takes on the color of the background. So I have a couple of speckled egg colors and a couple of faded jeans, and I thought that this turned out really nice. I hope you enjoyed my card tutorial. Please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and thank you for watching.